Today's episode is sponsored by Craftsy. Calling all crafters, are you ready to dive deep into your favorite crafting projects and learn new techniques along the way? Then it's time to join Craftsy Premium Membership. Take advantage of this early bird Black Friday deal. For only $1.49, you'll receive a full year of access to expert-led tutorials, patterns, and projects in every category you can imagine. With a massive library of resources at your fingertips, you'll be able to create your best work yet and bring your crafting dreams to life. Don't wait. Sign up now at craftseyoffers.com and discover the endless possibilities of Craftsy Premium Membership. Thank you so much, Craftsy. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 274 of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustrialliance.org. Today on the show, we're talking about making and teaching art with my guest, Julie Fei-Fan Balzer. Based outside of Boston, Julie is a painter, printmaker, and collage artist who constructs vibrant compositions. Her artwork investigates the interplay of identity and perception, inviting viewers to take a longer look. Julie works in layers, both physically and metaphorically, exploring what is visible and what is concealed. Passionate about connecting with and inspiring other artists, she shares her expertise through in-person workshops and her online classroom at myartpractice.com. Julie's achievements include high-profile clients, multiple publications, including her book, Carve, Stamp, Play, and exhibits in New York City and Greater Boston. She's a graduate of Brown University, and I'm so happy to be here in Watertown, Massachusetts, visiting Julie's studio in person for today's conversation. So Julie, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. It's so funny to hear your bio coming out of somebody else's mouth. It just always sounds like, am I being pretentious? Is this, normal? All that good stuff.
Yeah, totally. I hear you. Had that same experience. So, first of all, your studio is beautiful, light-filled, full of inspiration and supplies and just everything yummy and good. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. And I'd love to kind of go back. I know you have a podcast with your mom, so we're going to talk about your mom in a little while, but I'd love to go back to where you were brought up and what you were like as a kid.
So, what was I like as a kid? That's always an interesting question, right? Because it's only what you know from the stories. So, I grew up outside of Boston, and I definitely was always told that I was a creative kid. And I definitely liked, theater, dance, music, art, all that kind of stuff. But like many people, I had that feeling you have where if you can't draw completely representationally, you therefore are not an artist. So then I thought, oh, well, it's something I enjoy and I, piddle around with it, but I'm not an artist. But the thing, of course, that I always tell my students that I think is so true, which is, you went to school, most everybody, for at least 12 years and sometimes more than that. And you read and you wrote every single day. So guess what you can do now? You can read and you can write. If you had drawn every single day, then guess what you'd be able to do? Draw. And so many art skills are just that. They're skills that you can go and get if you just have a willingness to practice, and that's been a big sort of, light bulb is the right word for me. And so I would say that one of the wonderful things that my parents did for me and for my brother, who's a filmmaker, is they encouraged our creativity always. And I think, creativity begins with curiosity. And if you ask me what my superpower is, I would say I am super curious. And it's something I certainly try to instill in my own son. It's something that I try to keep very much at the front, of my brain. There's a book that came out recently by Rick Rubin called The Creative Act. And one of the things he talks about is seeing the world through artist eyes. And what does that mean? And I think that what that means is that you are constantly noticing things. You're constantly aware. You're thinking about shapes. You're thinking about colors. I assume I'm not a musician. If you're a musician, there are sounds that you hear. There are connections you make. There's sort of a constant desire to create synthesis with what's happening around you. And I think so much of what I do in my business is take people who have been pushed away from art in some way, who've been told either that they can't do art or they shouldn't do art or they feel that art isn't for them. And I say, listen, art is for you. And here's the path towards reclaiming art as something that you can and you should and you will do. And, really covering all the sort of parts of how that works for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when you mentioned theater and when you were in high school, were you involved in theater? Because I know you majored in theater when you went to college. So there must have been some period of time in which, and I'm assuming too that kind of helps you now when you're in front of an audience or a classroom of students. So tell us a little bit about the theater piece of your life.
So if you had read my 4th grade paper, which I'm sure you're jealous that you haven't, it would have said something like, I want to grow up and be a theatrical director.
Okay.
I want to run a theater company. And in fact, that's what I did. So I lived in New York for 15 or 16 years, and I ran a small theater company. And my degree was in theater, and I was a theatrical director. And being a director is, it's a very particular set of skills, and yet it translates to so many things. In essentials, when you're a theatrical director, you're a facilitator. You have to take a group of disparate people, bring them together as a team on day one. It's kind of like being a manager and building a high-performing team in any kind of business. So you have to build the team and immediately make, the chemistry happen, set out squabbles, set everybody towards a goal. And then you're doing facilitation at every single rehearsal where you're trying to get out of people the best possible performance. And the ideal situation is that they think all the ideas that are happening are their own. And they have no sense that you've done anything. But you have, obviously, because you've made them come to the conclusions themselves. You made them make the choices themselves, And to a certain extent, I think that all of that directorial training and experience translates into teaching, not in the way that people would necessarily think. I think people, when you say theater, think that I'm up there dancing and performing, and so public speaking is the thing. But it's not that. It's being able to coach people on an individual level, even in a busy classroom, being able to see that this person needs a little pushing, that person needs you to be hands off, that person needs, to be paired up with someone who can help them. Like it's really about reading people and understanding how to get the best performance, so to speak, out of them, even if it's the best performances, doing gelatin printing or whatever else it may be. And so I think too, in my video classes, because obviously so much has switched to online, whether I'm teaching live online or video classes, like I'm always trying to find that way to make it where people come to conclusions by themselves. It's not a sort of monkey see, monkey do. It's more of these are the principles and ideas behind why I'm doing this. And now I'm encouraging you to take this, and move it into your own style, materials. I do a lot of different things. I've done lots of fiber art. I do lots of painting and printmaking, collage. I've done crafting of all kinds. And I find that the cross-pollination is enormously stimulating, but also that it allows me to have a quilter and a knitter and a printmaker all in the same class about design and be able to have a practical conversation where I know enough technical knowledge about each person's little stream that I can help, push them in the right direction. I don't need to be able to play basketball to be the basketball coach. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, right. And so why do you think it's so important that people come to those conclusions on their own? And you said it's not monkey see, monkey do. And I think we've all been in art classes where it is that, the teacher draws something and you draw exactly what the teacher draws. And the resemblance is how you grade it. Is it as close or not? And that's how you feel maybe a sense of failure as well. So why do you think it's so important that people sort of take the concepts, but then come to what they're going to do with them on their own?
I mean, the glib answer is if you give a man a fish, he eats for a meal. And if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime, right? The sort of longer answer is when you try to copy somebody, you will usually only be a pale version of whatever they can do, right? And so I think it's really important to be, as Dr. Seuss perhaps said, the youest you that you can be. I'm thinking a lot about how I've been making art now. I've been making art professionally. I incorporated my business in 2012. But I certainly, I've been making art for longer than that. And if someone comes to class and is new, for them to expect that in a 3-hour class, they're going to make something that looks like my work it's an impossibility. And it's unkind to them and it's unkind to me. Do you know what I mean? To think of it that way. But to think in a 3-hour class that they could gain principles and ideas and things that they could take into their own work. So it's important to me to make people feel successful. And I think success is about meeting people where they are, helping them get a little further on the ladder and not expecting everybody to be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think a lot of teachers can feel like failures if they don't come out of the class experience with everybody having achieved the ultimate goal. And the reality is that's just not really how human dynamics work.
Yeah. Yeah. And people are in different spaces. It makes me think a little bit about like the one-room schoolhouse theory, right? Which is like you can have all sorts of levels. And so this person might be doing math with kids that are older, and that person's doing reading with kids who are younger. But the point is that everybody's working together towards certain goals. And it's not based on this is how old you are, this is how whatever. You don't all have to be the same. It's not a one size fits all solution. It's you have 20 years of experience, you have 2 years of experience, or you know a lot about color theory and you know nothing about color theory. So how can I expect you to just both pick colors? Like one person feels confident and one person doesn't. So it's a matter of trying to figure out how to help everybody to achieve their own success. And that's actually one of the questions that I ask everybody at the beginning of class. I usually say, like, what are you hoping to get out of class? Because it forces people to actually think about, like, what do you want? Do you want to just have a good time? Great. Right. You know what I mean? Do you want to go home with your heirloom wedding album that you've made in class? Well, then we have a problem, right? And one of my favorite classes I ever taught is I teach this class sometimes called like, Yes, You Can Draw. And because I would say like 90% of people I know will be like, I can't draw.
Especially adults. I mean, this is adult education, we should be clear. And these are specific sort of issues that adults face coming into the classroom.
They are, because my 4-year-old will tell you that he is an artist.
100%. Up until around 9 years old, people feel, I'm the fastest runner.
Yes.
I'm the best artist. And then all of a sudden something happens. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, and on the first day I said, what do you want to get out of this, 6-hour class? An enormous number of people were like, I want to be able to draw by the end of this class. By the end, it became sort of something that we laughed about. And I said, the good and the bad news is you can draw right now.
Right.
And the only thing I'm going to do the next 6 hours is teach you that you do already know how to draw. But it's really helpful for people the reason that everybody's able to laugh at that is they realized how absurd it sounded.
Right.
When they said it out loud, right? And then it allowed us to have a real conversation about that it's really the fear that's there, not the ability.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what somehow gets ingrained when you're 9 or around that age, I feel like, is that fear somehow gets creeped in, and there's multiple ways that happens. But these are also people who have expressed the desire to get over it, right? Because they've paid for a class and shown up. So they've already kind of gotten over some pieces of that feeling. So, all right. So you were in New York City, you were a director, and then something happened because you're not doing that now. So what changed at that point?
So I had an art hobby that I was really enjoying. And I got really successful in my art hobby by accident. And I started making like more money and having more success in my hobby than I was having with my job. And I just thought something is wrong.
Paintings, or were you?
So
where was the money coming from?
So let's see, it's such a complicated thing. I got onto a TV show. I got hooked up with some big manufacturers and started doing a lot of work.
Like, how did they find you?
Yeah. So I would say like how it all began was by accident. I was getting, we got to go in the way, way back machine. So my first husband and I he had a clerkship in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which, no offense to Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is where the office, right, theoretically took place, but there's not a lot to do. And I was very bored. And so I wandered into, I think, like an AC Moore, and I was like, what is this stuff? And there was like all sorts of fun stuff to play with. And I bought a magazine there that was a scrapbooking magazine. And I saw that you could like get published. And I thought, oh, I'm a competitive A-type personality. I want to get published. So, I sent something, I made a scrapbook page and I sent some stuff in. And of course it got rejected. And I was like, okay, it's on, my friends. So then I set out like trying to figure out what made that work good and my work not good, which was a fascinating, study. And I learned about design principles and color theory. And I just, started studying. And this is somewhat early internet. So like not a lot of shopping online.
Yeah.
Not a lot of availability of stuff. And in New York City, I had a lot of art supply stores. So I would go to the art supply stores and I would make scrapbook paper and I would make embellishments and I would make like all the things that I wanted. And through that process, I learned a lot about art materials. I learned a lot about, all sorts of paintings. And, I did eventually start to get stuff accepted to magazines. And I also discovered at that time that the work that I liked to make and the work that I was able to make because I was painting everything, right, was a particular kind of style. And that's when I started to come to an understanding a little bit about the idea that it doesn't have to be cookie cutter. Like I don't have to make a page like this person in the magazine using their papers and their stickers and their design. Like I can do my own thing and be my own thing, and that's okay. And it sounds silly saying it out loud now, but I think there are a lot of people who need to go through that realization. Like it's okay to be different. So this is slightly tangential, but I do love a side quest. I was selling earrings at the farmer's market a couple of years ago, and this woman kept coming by. Multiple times. And I was like, is there something that you wish was here that's not here? And she said to me, I really think my granddaughter would love these earrings, but she'll only wear things that her friends wear. And I just don't know if I get them for her and if her friends aren't wearing them, if she won't wear them. And I don't want to waste them and da-da-da. And I said, I totally get it. But I thought, I also remember being that age, but I grew out of it. And I do think sometimes people don't grow out of it. And I think that must be very hard to constantly feel like you have to fit in, that you can't do anything different, that you can't wear anything different, that you can't think any differently, that you can't be any differently. And I am enormously thankful for art because I think that it has made me brave in my life. Because by being able to embrace the way I paint a line, the way I hold a brush, the way I like to use materials, it has encouraged me to be that way in my life and to say, well, these are the clothes that I like and these are the people I like.
To get to know your own self.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the part that happens in that is like you lose sight of what you want and who you are. And so you're making these decisions about what you wear and what you do and what you like and what you don't like based on everybody else, but losing sight of who you actually are. And over the long term, there's a lot of damage that can happen when that happens.
There really is. And I think, okay, so now I'm going to quote Grey's Anatomy. So we're really going high, low everywhere. But anyway, there was an episode many, many years ago, probably a decade ago, frankly, in which this woman came in and she had been married for 30 years. And Meredith was saying something about, oh, wow, that's amazing. And she was talking about how being married and having children is a carving away of yourself, that everybody asks for some little thing and it doesn't seem that big. So you give it. And it's just a little thing, a little thing, a little thing, a little thing. But the problem is all the little things add up. And one day you realize that you've carved away so much at yourself that there's nothing left. And who are you? It's something you don't recognize. And I thought it was such a beautiful metaphor for something I think is true for many people, but particularly for many women, that you are taught to accommodate and you're taught to just like be okay with it. And you're taught to like give what you can, and that I didn't want to be a person who carved away at myself constantly. And, it's hard to do that in your life and it's easier somehow in art.
Yeah.
And I found
gives you that back.
Exactly. And so I found when I could get brave in my art, I could get brave in my life. When it wasn't a disaster in my art studio, it turned out to not be a disaster in my life either.
I want to take a minute now to talk about our sponsor, Craftsy. And here is a message from Craftsy. At Craftsy, we know making. Whether you're new to the handmade life or looking to advance your skills, we have classes for all maker levels and interests. From knitting and sewing to quilting and embroidery, cooking, baking, paper crafts, and more, Craftsy's instructors guide and encourage you, empowering you to turn ideas into realities. And they have an exclusive offer for Craft Industry Alliance podcast listeners. Right now, you can get a whole year of their premium membership for only $1.49 as part of Craftsy's early bird Black Friday deal. Visit CraftsyOffers.com to sign up, and the discount will be automatically applied at checkout. For only $1.49, you'll get a full year of access to over 2,000 premium full-length classes. Take your craft to new levels with Craftsy. If you're an absolute beginner, Craftsy's instructors help build strong foundations as they teach, setting you up for success and helping you fix mistakes as you go. Their enthusiasm and strong teaching style make learning accessible to all. And if you're an experienced maker, Craftsy's for you too. From perfecting your fondant skills to tackling complex stitches, from eye-catching garden design to next steps in sourdough, Craftsy has advanced classes in all crafts from instructors who are experts in their field. With over 2,000 classes, including downloadable patterns and recipes, Craftsy has a class and a craft for everyone. Visit CraftsyOffers.com today and get a year of Craftsy premium membership for just $1.49. Don't miss out on 99% off for the entire year. Start turning ideas into projects you can be proud of. Get this exclusive offer at CraftsyOffers.com. Thank you so much, Craftsy. And now back to my conversation with Julie.
So backtracking from that tangent. So one of the things that happened is I contributed some scrapbook pages to a book about doodling. Then the author of that book was asked by Sakura of America, who makes pens, right, to go on a TV show. She couldn't do it, so she asked if anybody else could. This is so random, but I had been on a after school special with Sinbad when I was a kid. I know.
Funny.
Hilarious. It was it was called Reading, Writing, and Rapmataz. And we rapped about reading and writing.
Wow.
I know. Good news. It was pre-internet, so you can't find it. But anyway, so I was like, I have some experience, and so I got interviewed on the phone by some people from Sakura. It's pre-Zoom. It's all that stuff. And so they were like, okay, great. So I went out, I did my thing.
Where was this?
In Ohio.
Oh, okay.
So I went to Ohio and I filmed this thing, with Chaos Productions, who has a lot of craft titles that they do. And, the producer came back after I had done my piece and she said, "Who are you?" And I was like, I said, "I'm sorry. Julie, I was just out there. Am I not supposed to be here? Blah, blah, blah." And she was like, No. What have you done? Who are you? And I was like, I don't understand the question. And over time, she kept bringing me back for different shows. She eventually had me host a show. And I once asked her, I said, I'm not a conventionally attractive person. I'm not anything special. Why? What was it? What's the reason that you were this girl? And she said, you have two skills that are pretty much unteachable. So they're dumb luck skills. One of which is, she said, your personality comes through the camera. That either is or it isn't. And you can't help it if it does, and you can't help it if it doesn't, right? And then she said the second thing is you have a way of taking things that are complex and breaking them down into something that's easy and understandable, which is for how-to TV.
Yeah, the key.
That's the key. And it's the same as true for that's what's important for teaching classes. That's what's important for video classes. That's what's important for YouTube videos and all that stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay. And then that led to just a whole constellation of other things. I wrote a book. I got hooked up with a bunch of manufacturers from doing the show for so many years. I did a ton of trade shows. I did a lot of, you know what I mean? And I was really working in the industry for a long time. I ended up doing a lot of HSN, Home Shopping Network, and stuff like that. I did some, infomercially kind of stuff. And it was a great, fun, wonderful career. For a while, I had a column in Cloth Paper Scissors magazine, right? I did a lot of contributing to different other kinds of magazines, blah, blah, blah.
Your book was with Interweave.
My book was with Interweave.
2013.
Yes, no longer exists, Interweave, sadly.
But yeah, I mean, it does, but it was not the
different,
same.
different. Yeah.
But those were that was right toward the end of the good old days of craft publishing, when there was budget for marketing and all kinds of stuff. So,
yeah. It was the tail end, and it was good tail end.
Yeah.
So then all of that turned around to somehow, over the process of several years, my interest shifted from doing things like scrapbooking and quilting and project life and all that kind of paper crafting and stuff into doing more fine art. And once again, what happened is I wanted to get into an exhibition, and I wanted to do this and that, and I got rejected. And so I said, game on, friends.
Right.
Let's figure out how to get better.
Spirit. Like when someone says no, you're like, wait, I will figure this out.
I think of myself much like Jennifer Grey's character in the Dirty Dancing movie when she's told she can't do the dance, and then she's like, oh, really? Mm-hmm. I will do it. So yes, unfortunately, I'm sure if you ask my mother, the way to get me to do anything is to tell me that I can't, and then I will. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I will learn to do this. And I believe in education, and I believe in learning. And so I dove deep into all sorts of art theory and art history. And I had the deep luxury in New York City of living like 3 blocks from MoMA. Mm. And so, I mean, when I say I went like once, twice, 3 times a week to see some of the greatest paintings and other artworks ever made. And, you know, obviously in New York City, you've got the Met, you've got all sorts of fantastic, you know, art lectures, art events. And I was just steeped in it and taking classes at the Art Students League and doing all sorts of things that were just available to me because I happened to be there. Mm-hmm. Right. And then it meant that by the time I sort of moved back to the Boston area, I had an idea of who I was and what I wanted, and, you know, had a ton of experience with different things. And I've spent, you know, the last few years kind of like honing my business, honing my skills, doing all that kind of stuff. And, you know, now I'm pleased to say, like, I've had more shows this last year than I have in the entirety of like probably the previous 10 years, you know, and it feels like a shift. It's not so much a shift in creativity, but a shift in like maybe the subject matter or the focus of that creativity.
And was there any fear there that you would alienate your current audience? Because like the audience you had built with your book, with the television shows, you know, with the being published, all of that is like this sort of DIY scrapbook, you know, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's craft. It's a craft DIY audience who's learning to make their own things. Mm-hmm. And then when you're shifting to fine art, that's a very different, you know, it's a very different audience, very different. So were you at all worried? Because a lot of times I think when people pivot, they're like, oh no, I have to do 2 things. I have to keep my audience and do it not, and if I'm going to change, because what will they say? They'll be all upset with me.
Yes. So is there fear? Yes. Was there fear? Yes. Will there be fear? Yes. But here's the thing that I finally figured out, and it's like what we talked about earlier. You can't live your life for other people.
Right.
Now, I will say I am the breadwinner for my family. If I don't make money, we don't pay our mortgage. Like, that's a real thing, you know? So it is important to me, obviously, that I keep my business going. But the other thing is I need to be passionate about what I'm doing. I need to be excited about what I'm doing.
It's got to be, if it's not there, it's not there.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody will know.
They all know.
Yeah.
And like, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's not servicing my audience to be inauthentic.
And just dragging it along for the sake of dragging it along.
Yeah. And I have to believe that there are people like me. There are people who come in because they like paper crafting and they want to make cards and they like scrapbooking and they don't have any idea what an art principle is and they don't see any use for it. And that's where I was 20 years ago. So I get that. But it's like, I either need to find people who I can tell them, I've walked that path, come with me. Or I need to find people who are like that and say, good for you. I'll see you in 10 years.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think I also run into a lot of people who are not interested in the kind of, I would say, like intellectually rigorous questions that I'm interested in. And I also think like, great, that's fine. As Dita Von Teese said, you can be the juiciest peach in the bowl, but if he just don't like peaches, it doesn't matter. And I think that's true, which is, I have a particular way of teaching. It is a lot about talking. It's a lot about thinking. It's a lot about forcing you to look at yourself and think about who you are in relationship to your art. It requires you to want to be there, you know, and like, that's not for everyone. And I think that's fine. There's a story I tell all the time because it so resonated with me, which is this comic was asking this older comedian, how do you find your audience? And the comedian said, that's the wrong question. You don't find your audience. They find you.
Yeah.
You tell your jokes your way.
That's so comforting
right?
too, because I feel like, especially with small business, creative business, people always like, I need to find an audience. I need to build my audience.
No. You need to do what you do with excellence. The people who keep laughing, they'll tell their friends and their friends will show up. And so the answer is, I need to keep doing what I do, but with excellence, with passion, with enthusiasm. And I think that if I do that, then the people who want and what I have, you know, what I offer, who think the way that I think, then they'll come and they'll be ready for it. And the people who won't, there are so many awesome teachers,
especially
artists.
Now, yeah. You can find anything you want. So
exactly.
Go ahead and find it. Exactly. So do you ever have fear or feelings about having not gone to art school, right? Like this is all you went to Brown, but you majored in theater. You didn't take, maybe you took a few classes, but you didn't major in art. You didn't go to an art school. And so, but now you're an artist. So, and obviously that's a lot of people's story, but there can at times be a feeling of like imposter syndrome or like, I don't have the credentials to do this. So how dare I call myself this sort of thing? Did that ever come to you?
So the answer is I used to. Absolutely. I worked very hard not to. And there are a couple of reasons why. I wish I had gone to art school for the connections. I think much like business school, art school is about who you meet and who you know. So much of success in the art world is actually a network-based issue. You know this person who's represented by this gallery. You go to their opening. You get to talking to people.
Even in the craft world, that's how it happens.
It is. It is. It's always about who you know. Community, I think, is so key, and relationships are so key. I think it's true in so many businesses. I mean, that's the theory of LinkedIn and so many other things, right? And so I regret that I don't have that community because I don't. And that I feel like is sad for a lot of reasons, sad for like personal development reasons, sad for, you know, like just plain old professional issues, et cetera, et cetera. That said, as far as the art education part of it, I do feel that I've spent the better part of 20 years diving down into it, and I feel confident. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? That I've I've done the art history, I've done the art theory. Yeah. You know, I've taken crit classes. I've worked with a lot of different teachers over the years in many different styles and disciplines and stuff. You put yourself
through it, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, which is very possible and very
yeah.
You can easily do. Yeah, not easily, but you can do. Yes.
So, like, the question always is like, but do I feel that ever that like I'm not enough or like that I'm an imposter? Absolutely, every day in every way. But I think you have to fake it till you make it, and you have to think and speak about yourself positively because so many other people are going to be unkind to you that if you are, especially on the internet, that if you are also unkind to yourself, that's just a terrible combination, you know? And so I would say one of the things I tell people all the time is if there's one skill I want you to gain from me, it's the ability to believe in yourself. That's the best art skill that you can have. That's the best life skill that you can have. But like, if you can believe in yourself, but still be open to criticism and feedback, normal criticism and feedback, not people just saying you're stupid or ugly or whatever else, you know, I think that that is the key to so much success.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when it comes to art education, you have gone through some training with some of these brands. Like I see a whole lot of golden paint here.
Yeah.
And I know you went through, like, I don't know what they call it, like a training course or something that they offered, and with some other art materials as well. So what do you feel like you gained from learning so much and so in depth about materials in particular?
I wish I'd paid more attention in chemistry. When they said you'll need this later in life, I thought that was a lie. But now I do. And I will say, like, science, if you think about the olden days, like scientists and artists were the same thing because they were having to do alchemy, essentially. They were having to make their own paints. They're having to make their own products. And so I do think that one of the things about like the golden artist educator training, or I went to ranger training, or, you know, any of that stuff is that you learn how important it is to know your materials, to understand their strengths, their weaknesses, what they were intended for, how, you know, what are the best ways to use them, show them off, all that kind of stuff. And that has made me very brave about trying new things, because I'm like, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? You know, and just put it through the ringer so that I really understand anytime a new material comes into my studio, right? And once you have material confidence, then I think you're like, when you're like, oh, I need a heavier line, I don't have to like wonder what could do that. I can immediately think of 12 things that can do that, you know? And so all of that, I'm so appreciative of all of that, because I feel like I really now like have my materials down, understand them, get them, feel confident with them, all that kind of stuff. And I think that translates into the teaching I do, because a lot of what I focus on is understanding what this can do for you, and then you get to choose how to use it. So you can be a surface designer who works on fabric, and someone else can be a paper crafter who only makes cards, and we can both learn the same thing using the same materials, and then go off and use them in the ways that we want to. You know?
Right. Yeah. So that kind of material training is really worth investing.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. And I know you're biracial, and that's an important part of your identity. And you have a podcast with your mom. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why that's important to you in your life, and also about your mom and the podcast.
So, I mean, one of the interesting things is, I know people can't see me, so I'll just say I am a mostly white presenting woman with sort of like curly brown hair. And my mother is Chinese and my father is white. And I have always been assumed to be white, or sometimes Hispanic, because anybody who's vaguely mixed race is usually considered to be Hispanic for some reason. And it's one of the many ways in which I, like many other people, go through the world being perceived differently than we are. Right? And, you know, I have a stepbrother and stepsister who are half black and half white. I have, you know, my sister-in-law is half Sri Lankan and half white. I have a very mixed race family, you know, and everybody has a different like place that they're coming from and different ways that they're perceived. You know, my stepsister is as black as I am Chinese, but she's seen as black and I'm seen as white. And is that how either of us self-identify, or is that how the world sees us? And I think there are lots of ways besides race that this is true. You know, I'm an overweight, middle-aged woman in a world that values, you know, young and thin people. And so I may perceive myself one way, but people have assumptions about me based on the way that I look. You know, I was in a board meeting for the Cambridge Art Association this week, and there are two women who look very similar, sort of similarly aged, tall, rangy, you know, well-spoken, intelligent women, live in similar areas. And we had to do this exercise where we had to find 3 things in common with the person next to us, like an icebreaker, in 5 minutes. And when they came back to tell people about themselves, they had nothing in common. And by looking, they were like, we are women on Earth. They were like that, and we are in this room.
But
that
looking
is
at them, you'd be
looking
like,
at them. Yeah, I would be like, they are going to have so many things in common. They look like they're interchangeable to me in some ways. Like they look this, you know what I mean? And it was so wrong. And I was like, that is fantastic, because that is again about identity versus perception. Identity is how I see myself. Perception is how you see me. And I think is one of the most fascinating things on earth is how either we identify and present. And I actually have it's come up in my life in many different ways. So my father was a management consultant, and in my 20s, I did some work for him where I would help him with some of his courses. And one of the courses that he would teach to these executives was about personal voice. And something that he said often over and over to them in these courses is he would talk about, listen, if you're a flute, you can't play tuba music. And if you're a tuba, you can't play flute music. So there's no way for you to be the same kind of leader as someone else. You have to figure out who you are and how people perceive you. And he used to talk about, if people perceive you as cold, it doesn't matter how you feel about yourself. That's how they feel about you. And so you have to find a way to be warm if people perceive you as cold. So maybe you have to smile like a crazy person. You have to get rid of your, frowny face that is not intentional, but that's because people perceive you that way. It becomes true. And I think that's sunk into me a lot, thinking about like how you feel you are versus how people think of you. You can manipulate that if you know what it is. And so, for instance, I think of myself as the nerdiest of nerds and fairly like, laid back and like quiet. And I will say over and over in my life, from my early 20s on, people have said to me, you're very intimidating, or you're very, you know what I mean? You seem very confident or whatever else, which is not how I perceive myself. But when I realized that that's how other people perceive myself, it forced me to say, okay, I've got to smile more. I've got to ask more questions. I've got to be more, body language open, casual, to try to stop that, perception or try to negate it slightly, and this is, again, it's fascinating that you could do this. There was an author whose name is escaping me at the moment, but she was from Nigeria, and she came to school in America. And I heard a podcast interview with her, and she was talking about how when she came to college, people were like, oh, your English is so good. And she was like, Nigeria's official language is English. Like, how dumb are you, right? But the thing is, they had this perception of people from Africa that was different than the reality, and like she said, her roommate was like, this is a stove. And she was like, have you been to a city in Nigeria? Like, do you understand? Like, it's not a campfire. But again, they had a perception of Africa that was not the reality. And so she said she became an author and wrote books because she wanted to talk about some realities that people maybe didn't know about. And I think it's so much of the art that I make is about this idea of what you think you're seeing versus what actually is. It's one of the reasons I like to work in layers. I always hope that people see one thing in my work from afar and then get closer and are surprised or interested or intrigued in some way. And I think, all of that is to say that I think that one thing we all need to work on, is being more open.
Yeah.
And that's certainly a mantra that I do in my business. And it's certainly something that I've tried to use as I guide my business forward, through the pandemic and everything else, was like, I cannot say like that this is the way it's always been done, so this is the way it will be done. I need to be open.
Yeah.
To the idea that there are new methodologies, new techniques, new ideas, new expectations, and even something that consumers are having trouble with now is there's new price points.
Right.
Everything's getting a little bit more expensive.
Did you pivot toward online teaching during the pandemic, or have you been before you did?
I did. So timing wise,
has that been lucrative for, like, has that become something that's now, you're not giving it up now that the pandemic has, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, there are fewer venues to teach at now. Anyway, people are less wanting to come to in-person classes, right? The convenience is too big. But also, I had a baby at the end of November 2019. Pandemic was March 2020. So it's hard for me to figure out which was the baby and which was the pandemic. But either way, it was a real housebound time.
Yeah. Okay. So and then you added online classes and you're keeping that.
Yes.
And are you still teaching in-person classes?
I do. So I teach some in-person classes, though, it used to be that I was teaching like a couple times a month, and now I teach in-person classes a couple times a year.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then the podcast.
Yeah. And so the podcast, I back in, 2011, I think, went to the Blog Her conference, right? Again, I'm in New York City, so easy to get to it. Right. Walk over to the Javits from my house. And there were people talking about podcasts, and I was like, wow, this is cool. I like to talk. I'm good at talking. I can talk. So I said to my mom, I was like, I think, we always have these interesting conversations about art. Like, let's just record them and do this podcast.
Is she an artist as well?
She's not. She's an art supporter. She's a creative person, but she's not an artist. Okay. And I thought that'll be a good perspective too, right? And so we started this very sporadic podcast with good intentions in 2012.
Wow. That's
right. That's a long time ago, right? Took us 9 years to get to 100 episodes or something, because it was like recording this week and then a month later and then a little bit here. And it was very casual and just sort of whenever we felt like it, we just did it. And then, podcasts really became a thing, hardcore, particular during the pandemic. And it was so interesting because I was like, oh, this is all, this is like definitely something people are tuning into, because I'm sure you found this. People who don't listen to podcasts don't get it. They're not interested. You can't convert them for whatever reason.
That was my husband for a very long time. There was just the hard no.
Yeah. Just that's like a waste of time. Right. Why would I do that? I don't want to do that. Yeah. Why would I listen to people talking? So it's such a fascinating thing to see that was one period of time where a lot of non-listeners actually came aboard, which is, who knows if we'll ever see that again. But so now we're doing it a little more regularly. It's still just us, talking about art. It's called Adventures in Arting. And, we've talked about, is the podcast a good idea? Is it not a good idea? And at the end of the day, we like talking. We like talking about art. And I think we'll do it until we're tired of talking about art.
Yeah. No, and I think it's nice to have the record of your relationship too with your mom. For me at least, my mom is getting older now, and to have those recorded conversations is a special thing. So
yeah, don't tell her, but now I have to edit out a lot of ums that I never had to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and what's coming up for you that maybe we haven't talked about that we should be talking about before we get to your recommendations?
So my online community, that's really about building your art practice, which is why it's called My Art Practice, is something that I've been working on for a couple of years, and it finally opened, earlier this year, and it's been really great. Thank you. Big job to build. Yeah. Yeah. It was a labor of love, and it was a big pivot for me. Yeah. Because one of the things that I decided is that there are so many classes out there, and I've taught millions of them on techniques, on all sorts of stuff, and those are fun. But I felt like there were a lot of students I ran into who were floundering with the kind of I know how to do stuff and I understand my materials and I'm smart and I'm capable, but I don't get it. How do I get to the next step? How do I get to where I have a personal voice? How do I get to where I'm a working artist? Yeah. How do I get to where I'm proud of the stuff that I make, even if I'm a hobbyist or whatever. And I was like, I feel like because of my past as a director and because of all of the work that I've done with people, I am uniquely equipped to help people on a personal level, develop an art practice that can sustain and carry them and really help them have a real artistic life. We all get burnt out too if we're not working properly. And I kind of explain to people that an art practice is kind of like ergonomics for your art, which is having rituals and systems so that you can create when you're not excited and you can be productive when you don't feel productive, and you have, records of things and what you're doing and you feel confident about what's next. And even if it's just a list of stuff you want to learn, you have a direction that you're going. So it doesn't feel sort of aimless or that feeling of, I don't know what to do next. Right. And so that's what my passion is right now. That's where I've been putting all my effort. So that's my big love baby right now in my business.
Yeah. Okay. So people should go check it out. And it's called My Art Practice, and it's a community that they can join. So yes, that's wonderful. Okay. All right. I want to get to your recommendations because you have some good ones. So the first one is a golden product, like we talked about, the golden paint. And it's GRIPR. Do you say that in a certain way? It's a paint tube opener. Is it gripper?
Yeah. It's the golden gripper.
Okay.
And obviously people can't see it, but I'm holding it right now.
Okay, it looks like tongs. Little tongs.
It looks like tongs. It's like a black loop. It has several circles in it. And each of the circles is sized for a different paint cap. And so what you can do is, I've never been able to open paint caps, and people with arthritis really can't open paint caps. This makes it 2 seconds, super easy, no matter how stuck. It's like a $4.99 tool that you will never drop. Like it is one of the workhorses in my studio.
Wow. Okay. Good to know. Little things in life that make a big difference. Okay. Then it's that next one I think we talked about earlier. It's called The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. And I have not read this book, so I think I need to get it.
Yeah, this is one of those books, like he was doing a lot of interviews and I listened to a bunch of podcasts with him on it. And, you know, he's an enjoyable, smart guy, but I was like, oh, this is so much hype and I'm not really into like The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron and all that kind of stuff. Like not for me. But then so many people recommended it that I was like, okay. So I made it actually the book club selection for my art practice. And so it would force me to read it. And, you know, as cynical as I am and as anti, you know, sort of frou-la-la as I am about some of these thoughts, there's so much wisdom in it. Yeah. And it's a great bathroom book in the sense that like you can pick it up at any page, read 3 sentences and have a thought for the day.
Yeah. That's great. No, I hear you on feeling like some of these things are so overly hyped or just so kind of out there, like it's just not for me. And then eventually you pick it up and you're like, oh, wait.
It's really good.
It's actually good. Yeah. The hype was worth it. Yeah. Okay. And then the Art Page a Day gallery calendar. Tell us about that.
So this is something actually that my mom gifted me last year for the first time. And this year I demanded it as a gift again, which is, it's a page a day calendar, the traditional small, like, you know, 6x6 square calendar that sits on your desk. And each day is a different work of art. And so I find great joy every day in seeing what the next work of art is. A lot of it is work I've never seen before and often by artists I've never heard of. And that's exciting. So for me, you know, someone once asked me, they said, how do you know so much about so many artists? Right? Because I'll often bring up a reference or see other artists. And I said, you know, part of it's from visiting a lot of museums and spending a lot of time with a lot of work. But a lot of it is because if I see an artist that I like and I don't know, I'm curious and I look it up and I learn something about them. And then I have it in my brain for the next time, you know? And I think that calendar in a very low, like non-invasive, easy way. It's like, it's there if you want to be interested and it's just pretty if you don't.
And it's about having more inputs and, you know, more quality inputs. I feel like is so important.
Yeah.
That is a way to increase that.
Yeah. Because the internet is so random in a way.
And also you see the same thing that you already saw because the way the algorithm works, if you spend time on that image or liked it or interacted with it in some way, you're going to see more images just like it, which, okay, sure, that's one way of going about things. But in your case, you're looking to see other things. And so this is a way to get away from that.
That's the perfect way of putting it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Julie, this has been great. Thank you so much for having me over. I love talking to you and it's been really inspiring. So thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today's episode was sponsored by Craftsy. Calling all crafters, are you ready to dive deep into your favorite crafting projects and learn new techniques along the way? Then it's time to join Craftsy Premium Membership. Take advantage of this early bird Black Friday deal. For only $1.49, you'll receive a full year of access to expert-led tutorials, patterns, and projects in every category you can imagine. With a massive library of resources at your fingertips, you'll be able to create your best work yet and bring your crafting dreams to life. Don't wait. Sign up now at CraftsyOffers.com and discover the endless possibilities of Craftsy Premium membership. Thank you so much, Craftsy. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals. When you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. Join us at craftindustrｙalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.